I want to call to order the January meeting of the Safety Committee. First of all, I want to make sure we have a chance to hear from our public speakers, and I think we have two of our friends and regular participants here to join us. Who's announcing the public speakers, if I may?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. We have 3 members of the public registered to speak today. As a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning week to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. The first speaker will be Lisa Daglian, followed by Jason Anthony.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Daglian, Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. Jano, congratulations on your confirmation as chair. It's a well-deserved recognition of your efforts and accomplishments on behalf of riders and the MTA as a whole. Safety is first and foremost on every rider's minds these days. The horrifying murder of Michelle Go struck a chord with so many of us. Our worst nightmare is being pushed in front of a train. It was only the latest in a string of high-profile incidents, but for so many it's the last straw. Simply, many people don't feel safe riding transit. We were glad to hear that Governor Hochul expedited deployment of SOS teams. It's critical that riders feel and be safe so they'll get back on board. This committee covers a lot of ground across all of the MTA's operating agencies and can be the speaker of truth about what's happening in the MTA and the MTA's response. It has the common theme of overall safety, both for workers and for riders, and that's extremely important, not just in the face of the terrible spate of crime we've seen, but all the time. Therefore, we're asking that the Safety Committee meet monthly and focus specifically and in detail on the issues that are top of mind of all users of the system. And please make it later in the day when more people will be likely to tune in. Everything outlined in the work plan is important and should be reported on regularly. For instance, why are we waiting until July to hear an update on the homeless outreach program? Please give us more detail. Why are subway customer accidents per million customers up year over year? Please answer questions. What happened to the perpetrators committing the crimes in the disturbing presentation at the end of the committee book? And some photos show drug usage, others encampments. Where are they, and are they still there? More regular updates would give us all a better idea of where these problem areas are and what's being done to combat them. Riders' top concern right now is safety. We know that's your top priority, too. We'd like to hear about it more in the spotlight. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Jason Anthony, followed by Marie Bowden.
Good morning, Jano, Pat, Andrew, Vinny, Bob, and others. Jason Anthony from Amazon Labor Union. This time, I want to congratulate Jano Lieber into becoming the permanent chairman and CEO of the MTA. And Jano, I want to tell you personally, congratulations. It couldn't become in a better time than this. And I want to see the Jano that I know since your days in capital construction. And we hope that in 2022 we continue that work. But we just received breaking news from Miles Meadow News 4 New York that the transit head will be now Jason Wilcox. My name, coincidentally, but I started the year riding the subway with Mayor Eric Adams, who saw firsthand the same situation that riders like myself see in a daily basis. So he started the day riding the J train from Kosciuszko Street to Chambers Street, Brooklyn Bridge, City Hall. But recently, during early mornings, when I ride the 2, 3, 4, and 5 and R trains going to Amazon in Staten Island, I've been seeing people smoking aboard trains, people smoking on platforms. Well, Captain O'Reilly was head of transit. All these claims fall into deaf ears. So we hope that Jason Wilcox will meet with advocates like myself, among others. So I'll see you guys in Bridges and Tunnels.
The next speaker will be Marie Bowden.
Morning, Jano. I suggest that, first a disclaimer. I'm being treated for dementia. I can't measure it, but the doctor can. And so if I make a mistake, you understand. Jano, I'm going to send this up to you. It says I'm retired, but I work part-time as a pain in the butt. My job's over. Could you pass that up to Jano or something? And you pass it on to somebody else. There's a serious issue about safety, and I've been involved with the manual uniform traffic control devices for many, many years. I sent you a copy of the regulation about railroad crossings. It specifically says railroad crossings have to be a black and white box of one sort or another. The Roaring Brook crossing is a red box. I was there yesterday. I checked on my way home. I had lunch with my daughter-in-law, my daughter and son-in-law. It's a red box. That's absolutely wrong. I've told Kathy many times to fix it, and she hasn't fixed it. So I think it's the obligation of this board to replace her as president of Metro-North Railroad. This is a safety issue. You either follow the law or you don't. You got me up here telling me to follow the law. Well, I want you to follow the law. This is safety. A red box, people who are colorblind can't see red. That's why the arrows are green and the crosses where you don't go are red. They have a cross and an arrow so the colorblind people can't say. And they can't get it. If they can't follow the law, why should anybody else?
Thank you for your participation and comment. This concludes the public comment session.
Okay. I just want to say, and Lisa Daglian's, the PCAC head's comments are sort of on point. We're having a regularly scheduled safety committee meeting at a moment when issues of safety have really exploded into the public debate for for all the inevitable reasons after the terrible incidents with Michelle Go. But yesterday we had another couple of serious and disturbing incidents as well. So I'm going to make a comment about that issue and what we're doing at the beginning of the Transit Committee meeting. As we planned, this meeting is going to focus on track safety, although there's some other issues to be mentioned as well, because we did, among other things, it's a huge issue for the agency, and we did have a serious incident where a track worker suffered a serious injury. So we're going to focus on that, but I just want to make sure everybody understands those bigger issues of safety are going to be discussed as part of our ongoing other aspects of board procedure, and we're going to be hearing from the new head of C&D about the track trespass working group that many of you have been involved with that I established a month or so ago, also as part of our board procedure. So just because we're focusing on track safety here, I just don't want there to be any misunderstanding on that one very important point. May I ask for approval of the minutes or any comments on the minutes? Are there any comments? Motion to approve? Second? Second. Any opposition? Minutes are approved. Pat, are there any changes to the work plan?
We have the new work plan is in the book for approval.
Okay. Any discussion on that work plan, which was provided in the book? Motion to approve? And a second. Any opposite? Please. The discussion. Oh, second. I think I have any opposition. The work plan is approved. Okay. So there has been and will be continue to be discussion regarding security concerns, COVID, and other safety issues. Much of that is reflected in the Safety Committee book. But as I said, we're going to focus on track safety in this meeting. I asked Pat if he would focus on that. Obviously, we set that up a couple of weeks ago before this latest spate of incidents. So I just want to hear Pat out, and if there are any other safety issues that we want to discuss, we'll come back to them after his presentation. Is that okay? Okay. Let's go ahead. Pat?
Thank you. This is meant to be, I'll talk through these slides, but this is meant to be a bit of a discussion, so feel free to ask questions along the way, and there's some experts in here that can help out with any of your questions. Let me start off by highlighting that the right-of-way safety, which I'll refer to as track safety throughout this discussion, starts before anyone goes onto the roadbed. As you might expect, there are many procedures that have been developed, and employees have been trained to understand and execute these to sustain safety. There are standards and overarching protocols for entering and just being present on the tracks. And there are other protocols for the different crafts to use when they're performing their many work tasks. The environment. As you're likely aware, the environment along the right-of-way has hazards that are important to know and understand and how to negotiate them. You can look at these pictures. Track ties, switches, and other infrastructure are just challenging to maneuver around. They're difficult. It's a difficult footing. It's very challenging. Everything is heavy, hard, and unyielding. Space to maneuver and avoid trains is also at a premium. Water, grease, and dust make the conditions very slippery on the tracks. The third rail is energized by 600 volts of energy. Not only do trains move, but switches, trip stops, and other equipment move, making the area that much more challenging. Trains are more silent than you might expect on their approach, largely due to continuous welded rail and resilient vibration pads that have been put in to lessen the noise. And then they further can be muffled by the noise and masked by the noise of other trains and equipment that are in the system. So you may not be aware that a train is coming upon you. And vast expanses of the network are underground, so they're dark with many shadows and curves. And some other portions are outside and elevated, bringing with that the danger of working at heights. Of course, it introduces falls and the dropping of other equipment. And then also for track that's outside, it's subject to extreme weather, which adds only a further measure of complexity. If you look on the slide right here, you can just see that between the individual standing on the track wall there, where the platform is on the far right picture, that there it is tight. The train pulls in right next to that track platform, so that people can get on and off it. There's little or no room to move if you're in that particular area, and so you have to have your situational awareness while you're walking through this whole and maneuvering through this whole enterprise. As these photos highlight, working in this rugged environment requires appropriate protective equipment. Composite-toed boots, hard hats, flashlights, reflective vests, gloves, safety glasses are all necessary parts of the equipment. Given these hazards, both the railroads and transit require track training before anyone goes out in the tracks, where they learn how to identify hazards and work safely around them, how to identify safe places to clear up. That's just to find a location where it is safe to let a train pass and you won't get hit. Identify and operate the safety systems along the right-of-way, and most importantly, learn how others in the system will react to the environment and to each other. Establishing protocols for gathering the appropriate equipment occurs before anyone goes onto the work site. Now, as our employees arrive in the location where they will enter the job site, and they're following their leadership, their leadership will then inspect them for their protective gear, as well as other necessary equipment such as radios, signal lamps, flags, third rail mats, air horns, portable trip stops, and more. By the way, this equipment plus other equipment, often heavy tools, are frequently carried by employees onto the roadway, which you can imagine just carrying all that equipment, sledgehammers, et cetera, and trying to navigate in these environments that you see in these pictures is really, really challenging and hard work for those that are down there. So, lots and lots of protocols and help from one another is required to make sure everybody stays safe. Next activity, most important activity, is the safety toolbox talk. Here we review the work that they will be doing during the period. They'll talk through special conditions, in particular like which tracks are in service or not in service, times when power may be on or off, and if there's any other work being performed in the area, potential contaminants in the air, and whether there are other work trains in the area also. They'll review hazards that are unique to the work site, like working on a grade or a curve or a crossover, and the frequency of trains as they come through. They will also review actions of the different roles, the flaggers, the work crew, taskings, and anyone else that's on the work gang. Track safety measures associated with the site, unique clear-up areas, where the power shutoff boxes are, protection on adjacent tracks, etc. Specific attention is paid to the type of flagging protection required, and there's essentially a couple of kinds. There's point-to-point flagging. This is best on straight track sections where clearing up can be conducted quickly and achieved with about a 650-foot advanced warning. If track is out of service and there's a potential for work trains to move in, there's a potential for work trains to move in both directions, so flaggers may be needed at both ends of the work party and not just the lead of it. And this is often done under what we call a general order, or where the track's all out of service. And then there's also full flagging is required, which is usually where in curves and when there's a suspension for some immediate danger, like a broken track has been found on the work site. Full flagging requires a significant crew. They post at the station ahead. They allow you to have multiple lines of sight so that you can get around a curve or whether other obstruction might be in the system, so that everybody remains safe and early warning can happen. And no one can begin to work until flagging protections are established. In addition to the work crew setting up protection, trained crews will also be notified of any work that will be performed along the right-of-way, and this is so that when they see, they'll be on the lookout for signal lights, especially the ones that the track crew puts out, and they'll be ready to react based on what those lights and flaggers tell them. So they'll be alert for that work. Also, once all that's ready to go, the crews contact the RCC or the Rail Control Center or the Operations Center from one of the railroads, and they let them know that they're going out on track and get permission to go out on the track. With the safety preparations in place, the next layer of safety measures are applied as the work may require. That's, for instance, and could include the installation of third rail safety mats, identification of clear up areas, and I say this again because it shouldn't be on adjacent track, particularly just because of the dangers of it being active. What I mean by that is you don't want to be on one track and then think you're going to clear up to the track that's next to it because you think there's no train on it. Again, trains are quiet, or they may be their notice may be masked by the train or a train on your track. Communications between flaggers and work crews need to be set, and if the work crew will be moving, it is determined that the current method of flagging is not adequate. Adjustments must be made to the flagging. So if you're doing point-to-point flagging and you find out that you're coming up on a curve and you need to do something different, then they will adjust the kind of flagging methods that they're using and making sure everybody's safe. Everybody's got to look out for the other guy. When work is complete, the process is reversed to get the crew off the right-of-way. And let the rail control center know that the crews are gone, and that let the train crews know that it's safe to traverse the area without looking for maintenance crews. And then the last thing that happens often during one of these events is that the Office of System Safety, the different safety offices, will send quality assurance folks out to spot check now and again to see that all of these measures are being put in place. That is a snapshot of all the work that goes into just getting people out and trying to keep them safe in the right of way. That does not go into how they actually use their tools, which is a huge protocols and procedures for all that safely, and many other activities that they may do on the right of way. If there are no questions, I'll go ahead.
I always worry in this committee because I don't want to delve into a specific department because I feel like then it gets repetitive for what you're going to cover in that area. The unfortunate thing about being on this board a long time is you remember different things. So when Spite and Dival's crash occurred in December of 2013, it was preceded by several months of other much more minor accidents. One was, if I remember, sometime in I think like June of 2013. It was a worker was struck because they hadn't figured out who was on the track. And I read this New York Post piece from 2 weeks ago about the poor guy whose foot was severed working on the track in a similar situation. And unfortunately, my mind cast back to what was happening at Metro North. And so I guess I'd ask a question around culture of safety at transit. And again, if you want to cover that in transit, that's perfectly fine. But because I don't work in transit on that committee, but I start seeing history rhyming a little bit, and I get nervous given it is such a hard thing to pull back the perception of safety issues. So I don't know what your perception is of perception of safety at transit. I'd like to hear that, please.
So, you're only as good as your last event, right? And so, huge effort goes into trying to keep the workforce safe, as we described here. Every time there's one of these events, we examine it very, very carefully. Demetrius is here from Transit, who and can talk more about what, if you care to hear, more about what happened after this particular event and after every other event that happens. And we're going to go into the investigation part here, but there is also some remedial work that goes on right away, shut down to do some safety talks, deep examination of what happened in the area. But in terms of, safety culture, it is, what I want to say is that it's not a bad safety culture. That being said, it's just one of those things that you just can't take your eye off the ball.
So I do want Demetrius, because Demetrius is here, to comment on what took place. But, Pat gave a lot of details, but, a couple of those details that are germane to what Demetrius is looking at in that episode more broadly is that took place on a curve. There was there was flagging. Was the flagging done properly? Was the adjacent track operation done properly? Was the clearance planned properly? All those issues are being looked at. Demetrius.
I think we're going to cover the incident itself specifically, right? No?
We're going to talk about investigations in general, but if you just want to talk about what you've done after the fact.
Sure. So without a question, your point about the safety culture, I always find that anytime there is an incident that happens, it's not just one failure, and it requires multiple areas where there were lapses, and I think that is the case in this instance. Oftentimes we try to see whether or not the processes that we have in place failed. In this case, that was not the case. So immediately, when we first heard that a person was struck, we immediately shut down all non-emergency work. So all track that was out of service for work that wasn't like emergency, folks doing inspections, maintenance work, everything shut down. The first focus is to talk about safety. We tell employees that a person was struck. It immediately gets to heighten awareness. When you stop people from working, like immediately, that does send a message to folks that This is not just the standard protocol anymore. Then we immediately had the folks talk about just overall safety because we didn't know the details of the investigation itself. And then over the next couple of days, as the investigation becomes clear, we talk about specific elements of flagging, specific elements of track safety that are not specifically what transpired in the incident because it itself is still open, but you still talk about elements that could have affected it. And then within the 2 days following, we had a safety stand down. Safety stand down is where you delay the work 2-3 hours before going. No one goes on the track. They discuss specific incidents, rules tied to this specific incident, but don't discuss the incident. It is very clear about the objective, everyone's role in safety, and how you are to keep yourself safe. We go through every flagging rule that a person would be responsible for employing and the responsibility of people to not only keep themselves safe, but also to keep their partners safe. We have, in transit, I worked on the Long Island Railroad, and I've had the pleasure of working for transit. We have so many rules here that protect our employees. And if we follow them, we are safe.
Okay. Carry on. I just don't want to
Okay, yeah.
run afoul of time, and I want to give a chance for other comments if there are issues folks want to
Yeah.
raise. Go ahead.
I'll be real quick here. Just quick about investigations. So first, there are many thresholds that determine when an investigation is warranted by the Department of Subways or Railroad and their offices of safety. Typically, if estimates exceed a certain damage costs or if an individual is seriously injured, that triggers a significant investigation. New York City Transit and the FTA have established thresholds, and the Federal Railroad Administration have specific thresholds for the railroads too. Further, there are multiple levels of investigation that can occur depending on the severity of the incident. In all the cases, the Department of Subways, in this case, will have experts immediately deployed to assist with making the site safe, removing passengers and crew, set up safety barriers, and establish communications. In this case, the Department of Subways team will also participate in helping determine the cause. Simultaneously, the offices of system safety will immediately dispatch investigators to begin a detailed investigation. These investigators will control the site, which until such time as they have gathered the necessary physical evidence, which includes identifying those involved, identifying witnesses, securing the event recorder and video, photographing the scene, and attempting to determine the initial proximate cause of the incident. If the accident is of significant severity, the New York State Public Transportation Safety Board, the PTSB, and/or the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, will also investigate. Oops. While on the site, investigation, train, and crews will be sent. The crews for the train and if they're a work crew will be directed to go do drug and alcohol screening. Once the on-site evidence has been captured and the site is released back to the Department of Subways or the railroad to put back into service. The Office of System Safety continues to collect and evaluate other information that may be bearing to the accident. For example, they will collect and assess maintenance records, review crews, interview crews, witnesses, and experts, collect and review any available video, and assemble and review standing operating and safety procedures. When the investigation is complete, the report and recommendations will be produced, and then agencies will follow up with recommendations. And you heard some of the safety talk stuff and the safety programs that were immediately put in place just right away from Demetrius. With that, that's it.
So, I mean, I just want to underscore, we're at risk of making this all sound very bureaucratized. The key, I think, that Pat's presentation is meant to communicate is that there are very established protocols. You cannot have improvisation in this area. So there are very methodical, established protocols which everybody has to observe, both in the preparation and the operation of work in the safety environment, but also in how do you react when something goes wrong, because that's the only way you can make sure that evidence is collected and that whatever the condition is being quickly remediated. So, again, always at the risk of sounding like we're all being bureaucratic, but this is an area where we really need to have a very, very established set of protocols. And that's what Demetrius, I think, is conveying, is that when things go wrong, and we cannot, we have zero tolerance for that, but you have to stop and reestablish and reinforce and re-clarify those protocols and make sure we understand what went wrong. So that's the basic framework in which we're operating. Any other comments from folks? Neil, Commissioner?
Look, I spent 6 years as an Army helicopter pilot, and fortunately I haven't had to raise that a lot because we haven't had the safety issues that we used to have. And I spent many years doing what Demetrius was talking about, safety stand-downs and the protocols that are incredibly necessary. And what you said earlier, Demetrius, resonated with me with the trail of accidents. It's never just that it was stormy outside. It was that I was tired and my co-pilot was sick, so I took a backup guy, and I didn't know the route, and the aircraft was unfamiliar, and it was stormy outside. So I understand it. I love what you said about bureaucratizing, in the sense that, yes, that sounds actually in one sense terrible, but on the other hand, actually it's fantastic, because the more it's procedural, the more the behaviors are codified and committed to paper, not just memory, and it is there and around and is part of everyone's job, just like it is how you unscrew a light bulb. The technical and the safety aspects combined are how you institutionalize it, and I love hearing that. And I get the sense, in fact, that safety is still a strong part of the culture coming back after many years of challenges, so thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to remind folks, we had a big accident last year in a contractor environment. Remember, we're really talking about where we control, the agency controls, because it's an agency workforce environment, principally on track, right? When we have a contractor situation, it's a slightly different evaluation, and we did conduct that, if you remember, on a Long Island Railroad electricity accident on the third track project. We actually had a stand down for a month. So again, slightly different, but same principles, which is you have to reestablish, reexamine what the rules of the road are and whether people are following them. I want to give the board members who have attended this meeting a chance to raise other safety issues relative to what's in the book or otherwise. Commissioner Lynn.
So, thank you, and I don't want to minimize the importance of this presentation and the importance of what we're talking about, but I do, but I do want to sort of underscore what Lisa Daglian said before, which I think at this moment, where the safety and the perception of safety is so critical, I really do think that we need a central focus that's not just at each particular agency presentation, but involves board members who may not be. For instance, I know that Neil always has important and useful things to contribute and isn't at the transit meeting. And so I do believe that we need to talk in a central way about these issues. And I really heartily support that it should not just be every other month or an 8:30, but we should have more import. And I do want to just make one specific point on analysis and numbers, if I might. And I really had promised myself, I was thinking of Hayda, I was thinking of Vinny, of not wanting to talk about COVID. And I really promised myself, I lost that battle with myself when I saw one page 30 in the presentation, which talks about it. I just have to talk about it for a minute, because it says that there's an average of 75% vaccinated in the department, and I'm concerned that it is showing a very specific number of 49,312 vaccinations. It doesn't show what the N is, the number. And as a matter of fact, if you have to divide that by 0.75 to get the number, and you come up with 65,000, which is well less than what the finance report reports, which is 66,000. And that was November, 67,000. And I believe there has been a lot of hiring in the last several months. And the hiring has all brought in vaccinated people, since you have to be vaccinated. So I am concerned, and I don't want to go now over the specifics, but I'd like to see the numbers. It says it's as of January of this year. I'd like to see the end. That's 1.1, and I'd like to make 0.2 before you go. Point 2 is, I asked to have a partner who would say that averages can be very deceiving, and would say that, in a pond that is 6 inches deep, you can still drown. And I think that the average of 7, and I think the average is perhaps more like 73, but we'll see when the number. We ought to break up that averages. And Vinny, with all due respect, I think we ought to break up the average in terms of property, in terms of, you would say many times, Jano, that C and D was at 95%. If C and D was at 95% vaccinated, that means everyone else is less than the average number.
I'm going to stop you because I think you're going down a tangent you might not want to go down.
Well,
Apologies, but
Yes.
I think the word average in there is, I think, a typo or wrong. That the number is 75%, number one. Number two is, so that may be wrong, and we apologize, but we'll go back over the numbers with you, I think. I'm almost positive that's wrong. The number is 75%. Number two, that's the ones we have cards for. We have said to you consistently, and we believe it, that all of our data collection from our workforce shows that there is a substantial percentage of folks that we have who haven't filled out the thing, who are in excess of that. But the number is not approximately or average 75%. It is 75%. So I want you to have that confidence, and we'll go back over the numbers. Number one. Number two is in the math. I think we need to give you all of the details, because it's obviously a hot button for you. That I think that the discrepancy that you're finding with your arithmetic may be attributable to the fact that we have a percentage of our workforce who is inactive, and therefore not subject to vax or tests because they're literally inactive. So let us go over those numbers with you, provide them to you timely so that we can answer your questions. Is that responsive?
that is responsive, and I'd like as much breakdown as possible, and thank you.
All right. Any other questions that the board members? I appreciate that two board members representing labor have joined us because we know how important workforce safety is. Vinny.
I just want to clarify one thing, Bob. You don't have to single me out as somebody that's an opponent of vaccination. I am 100% for vaccination. The MTA put a good program in place, vax or test mandate. And I believe we turned some corners and it's working. So all I would ask is, don't label me as an enemy in your mission. It's all I ask. I'm for vaccination. I've always been. We're doing what we need to do. If we have to revisit it, as I've said in the past, we would. But I just want to continue to support Pat and Jano's efforts in what we have in place now and the mandate that's in place now.
And I see that board member Albert has raised his hand, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole again if we don't have to. But one thing that we can, that was important to the MTA, and I just don't want it to go unnoticed, is that during this last Omicron surge, we had 700 locations where our workforce could get tested. And that, we've had a lot of debate here, and it's a friendly debate among good colleagues, but I just want to note that that was incredibly important to us in our ability to manage through this period, that our workforce probably had more access to testing than any other subgroup in the region, and that was a plus. But obviously there's a lot of different views on this subject, and I just wanted to get that one point across. Are there other issues that the folks want to deal with before we conclude this meeting? All right, we're going to come back to Brother Albert. I'm sorry. Board Member Albert.
Sure. Thank you. This is for Pat. Pat, in terms of track safety, how far in advance of the actual site location are train operators notified that there will be workers on the tracks? Before they start the run or somewhere along the run, or how far?
Dimitri Twiza.
So it all depends on the type of work that's being done. If the track is out of service, then everyone will know by general order that the track is out of service. There are certain flagging setups like point to point or your full flagging setup where you have lights that tell a train operator in advance that there is work up ahead. It's positioned a certain distance away that a person can bring their train to a safe speed before the train gets to the area of work. There are definitely precautions in advance so that the train operators themselves do know that the work is taking place. But there is also accountability on the employees that when they have the ability to see a train, they are required to move themselves from the tracks in all instances to make sure that they maintain their safety as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
No, just the second I turn.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Just, no.